Hi, I'm Dimitri with XYZ Create, and today I'll be building this super simple downdraft table.
Apart from the dust port, I built this thing with stuff I already had laying around. I started off by tightening a hose clamp around the dust port. You want to make sure it's tight, but not too tight. And this will act as our hole guide later on. Using a mold line as a guide, I could center the dust port to the box. Using the hose clamp as a guide, I drew out the rough shape of the circle. I then heated up the hose clamp to melt a hole through the box for the dust port. Here's where I ran into a bit of an issue, as I wasn't paying attention and I let the barrel of the hose clamp burn a hole right through. It's not a big deal, it just needs a little bit more work down the line. Also, if you're wondering why I'm melting as opposed to drilling, this polypropylene material tends to crack and shatter when you drill it. To attach the dust port to the box, I'm using E6000 adhesive. With the dust port in place, I could clamp it tightly to the box. Using Type-On original wood glue, I glued some scrap 1/8" plywood I had into a thicker piece to act as a sturdy top. In order to get the plywood to lay flat after gluing, I just applied some heavy objects I had around the shop. After letting the plywood set up overnight, it was ready for the next step. Using my bandsaw, I squared up one side of the plywood top. A table saw or a circular saw would have worked much better. However, I don't have any of those, so I just used my bandsaw. I then measured, marked, and cut the board to final width. I applied painter's tape to the ends of the board to reduce tear out, and I squared up one side on my miter saw. I then measured and cut the board to final length. After cutting, the piece still doesn't fit because of the rounded corners. I made a quick template of the rounded corners by rubbing a pencil on a piece of paper. After cutting the round profile out, we could transfer it to the plywood top. Using my disc sander, I sanded the line on all 4 corners. Just look at that perfect fit. Using E6000 adhesive, I can permanently attach the plywood top to the plastic lid. Using some heavy objects, I press both pieces together and let them sit overnight. In order to get a nice clean caulk line, I applied masking tape to the perimeter of the plastic lid and the plywood top. I'm using a clear silicone caulk to fill in the gap between the plastic and the plywood. Using my finger dipped in water, I'm smoothing out the top of the caulk line as well as pushing it down into the groove. Removing the masking tape reveals a clean caulk line. After letting the E6000 on the dust port cure for 24 hours, I removed it from the clamps and applied silicone. It's not pretty because of the mistake I made earlier, but it gets the job done. I also filled the 4 mounting holes on the inside. After finding the center of my top, I carefully lined up my drilling template and attached it with spray adhesive. Using a 1/4" bit chucked up in my drill press, I could start drilling all the holes. In total, I counted 117. I probably could have used pegboard for this, but I had a lot of fun drilling the holes myself. In order to give something for the silicone to bite into, I roughed up the smooth plastic surface using 120 grit sandpaper. I applied a nice thick bead of silicone caulk to the entire perimeter of the box. I had originally planned on using window weather stripping for the perimeter of the box, but I had a ton of silicone still left over, so I decided to use that, and it worked out great. After letting the silicone cure for 24 hours, we were ready to test this thing out.
Too much!
With the power level set to a more manageable level, I can show you guys how well this actually works. With the suction turned off and a 60 grit disc on my sander, you can see all the dust that's left on the surface. And here it is with the suction turned on. As you can clearly see, sanding with this downdraft table is almost entirely dust free.
So I hope you found something useful in this video, and if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you guys would like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, check out some of my other videos. That'll do it for this one. I'll see you guys next time.